Just a quick word to the parents. This week, we'll be talking about the fifth commandment, thou shalt not kill. This opens up all sorts of rather adult topics. We will be treating these in a way that is appropriate for children, but I encourage you to listen to these episodes before you turn them on to your family, just to make sure that it is content you want them to hear. You're listening to
Catholic Sprouts,
the daily podcast for Catholic kids that strives to plant seeds of faith. Hey there, Sprouts. Today is Thursday, July 9th, 2020. This week on the Catholic Sprouts podcast, we have been busy talking about the fifth commandment, you shall not kill. We have already talked about a whole bunch of very heavy topics. We looked at the example of Saint Maria Goretti and saw the total devastation of murder. We learned about the horrors of abortion and how even a life so little is still a life. Yesterday, we talked about two big topics, euthanasia and the death penalty. Well, I have good news for you. Today, we will be talking about something much lighter. Today, we are going to be talking about animals. So this commandment, you shall not kill, has to do with human beings. We know that a human life is so much, infinitely more valuable than an insect's life, than a plant's life, or even than an animal's life. This commandment is referring to the fact that we should never take the life of another human being. But we can still look at this commandment and understand how we should be treating animals. Of course, it is not a terrible, horrible crime to kill an animal. If you eat meat, then you have participated in the death of an animal, and that is nothing that you should feel terrible about. That is how we get food. But it can be complicated for a child especially to understand the way that we should treat animals and the fact that we can still use them for food. So let's go all the way back to the very, very beginning to understand the nature of animals, our duty towards them, and why we still can see a huge difference between them and human beings. So way back in the very beginning, if we read Genesis, we hear that God created light and darkness. He created the water and the land. And eventually, when he started creating creatures, he created the birds. He created the animals on the land and the animals in the sea. After he had created all of these animals, then he created human beings. And he gave the human beings certain tasks. He asked them to give a name to each of the animals and to also take care of them. Now, it's interesting that God asked human beings to name them. If you remember a few weeks ago when we were talking about the second commandment about valuing and reverencing the name of God, we know that naming someone means that we have power over them, that we are able to give them something that they can't give themselves. So when a human being names the animals, that means that we are above them. And to make that even more clear, God said that we should take care of them. So does this mean that we get to just abuse or ignore animals or use them however we see fit in every moment? No. Remember, animals were created by God. They have a special dignity because of that. They came directly out of the beautiful mind of God. They are creatures. We should really value them. And every piece of creation that God created shows us a little bit more of who God is. However, animals also have a purpose. They are useful. Each and every animal in this world is useful. Some animals are useful in that they are companionship for us. They make us feel loved. Other animals protect us. Other animals serve us by being our food or by pulling heavy loads. Animals are useful. Now, this is the big difference between an animal and a human being. We would never talk about a human being as being strictly useful. And once they aren't useful anymore, we no longer need them. That's a horrible way to think about a human being. And yet, because animals are different, we can think about animals in this way. Therefore, as long as we are treating our animals well, we are giving them a comfortable place to live, we are feeding them adequately, all these things, then we should not feel bad about using animals for their intended purpose. I grew up on a large cattle farm. We oftentimes were raising steers, keeping them healthy and happy as we could, even making sure they had a nice place to lay down. But ultimately, those animals were taken to the butcher and made into food to feed this world. The same is true with lots of farmers around this world, and they should never feel bad about that. They are doing what God intended them to do. They are being good stewards of the animals put on this earth. They are caring for them, feeding them, treating them with dignity as they deserve as an animal. And then they are using that animal in a way that God created them to be used. So I hope that this is helpful. It is important that we know where our food comes from and that we know all that it is involved. So today, friends, my challenge for you is to pray for all of those in the food industry. Remember, there's a lot of work that goes into getting the food onto your plate. A lot of people worked hard along the way. Pray for them all. And while you're at it, make sure to thank God for the goodness of His bounty, that you have enough to eat each and every day. That's it for Catholic Sprouts today. We'll be back tomorrow. But until then, continue to grow in your faith and truly sprout into the beautiful creation that God created you to be. Finally, I'd just like to thank all of our brand new Patreon supporters. You guys are incredible. We have so much support, and we are so thrilled to look to the future and to think of ways that we can grow this podcast and serve you better, all because of your support. If you would like to become a new Patreon member, we would love to have you. You get free goodies that go along with the week's content every single week. Just follow the link in this podcast episode's notes to find a way over to Patreon, to the Catholic Sprouts page, to join us and to start getting those goodies right away. Thank you.